Over 90% of most livestock health problems are based on either poor nutrition or parasites. That's what my dad has told me over and over and over again, something that he learned when he was in vet school 50 plus years ago. And especially when it comes to parasites, if you don't get them right, you will have a world of a lot of problems. I'm Rod from Dowdle Family Farms, and I'm on a mission to improve our soil's health, to graze our livestock, and to produce healthy pork in very realistic and practical ways. After all, there are a lot of homesteaders, farmsteaders, maybe even a few commercial producers who make a living farming, but they've got their heads so far in the clouds that it's just not practical on a commercial scale. In this video, let's explore some of the practical aspects of managing parasites with pigs. And we're going to start by debunking the most common 5 or 6 myths revolving around parasites and pigs particularly. We're going to talk a little bit about the parasite life cycle so you can understand how animals and livestock are usually infected, and then the other realistic treatment options and protocols that we have as producers to manage parasites on our livestock. Now, let me start off by saying that there'll be a few people that say pigs are full of parasites. And what many of these people don't know is that most livestock, from poultry, especially small ruminants like goats and sheep, have a lot of problems with parasites, more so than pigs. If you want specific references to the data here, let me encourage you to check out my resources page on our blog, dowdlefamilyfarms.com/resources. And the references that I use are either peer-reviewed, they're clinical-based studies, not some random anecdotal information that somebody's brother tried 50 years ago, or that their favorite YouTube homesteader is promoting because they get some kind of discount or referral program for every herbal antiparasitic treatment that they sell. First myth, pumpkins will worm your pigs. Before we get into the science of it, let me just say I fed 40,000 pounds of pumpkins, 10 breeder pigs for months, and I still had piglets dying of parasite issues from some free pigs that we had that were brought onto the farm. More about that problem later. I think the primary genesis of most of this myth is a little bit of credible scientific study that was done years ago. Essentially, pumpkins and winter squashes in the cucurbit family have this compound, curbitacin, if that's how it's pronounced, that has been used in some studies. It's been demonstrated that that compound has reduced some nematode populations, but primarily the lab studies have been done in rodents at very high doses and typically against very specific parasitic species. Most studies focus on its effect on nematodes and control in vitro environments, that's in labs, and it has not been tested in the digestive tracts of any livestock, particularly swine. And so it doesn't really translate to real world examples. Quite frankly, there's no peer-reviewed clinical trials, anything in the real world that show pumpkins being fed in large volume numbers control parasites or kill parasites in pigs. Myth 2, diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is often touted as a natural dewormer because it can mechanically damage insects' exoskeletons. However, on internal parasites in pigs, they're protected by the mucosal membranes and are not really impacted by diatomaceous earth in the same way. Moreover, when mixed with wet feed or when they're digested in the digestive tracts of the livestock, diatomaceous earth loses its abrasive properties, and controlled trials in livestock have shown little to no consistent benefit in reducing the internal parasites in livestock. A home garden with aphids, use diatomaceous earth. Now, people will have anecdotal examples, and we'll come back to some of those in a little bit. Now, myth 3, apple cider vinegar. The theory is that apple cider vinegar adjusts the stomach pH, gut pH of pigs, creating an antagonistic environment for helminths. But there's no strong evidence indicating that it does actually have that impact. And even if it does, there's no evidence to suggest that it actually kills the helminths outright. As best I can tell, that's speculation as well. And whatever impact these effects may have, realistically, they're poorly understood and really not applied to pigs as of yet. The fourth myth is garlic will deworm your pigs. Now, garlic does have sulfur-containing compounds that can have an antimicrobial property. Some lab tests show minor impacts on helminths in test tubes or petri dishes, but not in actual animals. These effects are often seen only at really high concentrations, and quite frankly, they're just not practical for field use on a daily basis. So it might be worth looking elsewhere unless you're going to try to feed 5 pounds of dried garlic to pigs every day. Now, the fifth myth that I've heard is people using chewing tobacco. You hear this from people who've gotten information normally from older farmers or older farming lore. Now, nicotine, the primary active compound in tobacco, is toxic to many invertebrates, and it's been studied for its anti-helminthic properties. Again, some in vitro studies have shown nicotine can paralyze or kill certain helminths, particularly in nematode cathode models. It's been used in some cultures as a folk dewormer. Nicotine can be highly toxic with narrow margin of safety. From what I understand, I don't know if you know somebody that's used it, they may be able to help you out there, but it can be potentially dangerous to the pigs that are ingesting it. Now, a lot of people will use herbs, essential oils, herbal blends that are marketed particularly for livestock. I'm not sure that they know what particular helmets they're trying to target, much less anything else. I'm wildly skeptical. Let's take a look at the large roundworm in pigs. Eggs often are consumed. They pass through to the intestine and through the digestive tract, where they often hatch. From there, they migrate through different organs in the body, where they eventually return to the intestines in their larval form and then become maturing adults. From the time the eggs are consumed by the pig in the mouth to the time that they are laying eggs can take 6 to 8 or 10 weeks, depending on the species and many other things. Many of these parasites have to live outside the host body for a period of time so that they can complete their life cycle changes. A lot of the common worms that affect pigs, like whipworms, nodular worms, red stomach worms, share a very similar mode of infection and development. Strongyloides ransomii, it's the parasite that nearly destroyed our breeding program several years back. It has a much shorter period. It can be as little as 5 days that they can become adults and start shedding eggs. They don't require an external environment for their complete reproductive cycle. They can be passed through the mammary glands into milk or colostrum or piglets, and it makes them extremely dangerous parasite for weaning pigs. Let me also say that had I not had a necropsy done with the additional specific identification of that worm, I would not have been able to treat it properly, and it could have been detrimental and completely devastated our pig program on our farm. But you'll hear some people say that there's no need in treating them unless you have a test to prove that you have parasites in your swine herd. And this is only partially true. Let me preface what I'm about to say with this. There is some concern about having these worming medications being used when they don't need to, and some increased resistance to these drugs. Because eggs are passed through the digestive tract, they show up in fecal samples. You take a fecal sample to a veterinarian, or you can do it at home. Put it in a float solution, look at it under a microscope, and determine if there are eggs in the fecal samples. Chances are your pet's veterinarian does that with dogs and cats, and they can do the same thing with pigs. However, they may not be able to identify the very specific type of pest just because they're not used to seeing it. Now let's remember for a second, fecal float smears only show up in tests where they pass eggs through the feces. You may have a young piglet that has heavy parasite loads that are in the larval stages, but they're not passing eggs yet. And so you may have loads currently of parasites. The life cycle takes longer than 4 weeks. However, you can have a 2-week-old piglet that shows high loads of threadworms because in just a few days they can be producing eggs. And that was the case with our piglets that died because of heavy threadworm parasites. Let's talk about 3 different classes of antihelmintic medications. First and foremost, what I think are the best are the macrocyclic lactones. That's basically ivermectin and doramectin. Very similar in the same family. Ivermectin has a residual effect up to 14 to 21 days. Doramectin can go up to 28 days. They are systemic warning medications that are effective against a wide range of parasites in pigs. In fact, most parasites that deal with pigs, including lice, will be dealt with the ivermectin class drugs. The exception to that is the porcine whipworm, Trichuris. They'll kill both adult and larval stages, migrating stages of most parasites that they control. Albendazole, most commonly in the form of Safeguard, is typically used orally. Safeguard pellets are often mixed with food. I don't particularly like using the Safeguard pellets because pigs will pick out the Safeguard pellets and not eat them. They don't prefer them. So I've got a feed mill that custom makes a ton or so of a pig dewormer for me, and that albendazole product is in the feed. The pigs just eat it for 3 to 5 days, and that's their dose of worming. Covers a lot of the parasites that ivermectin class drugs do. It's also effective against Trichuris or the porcine whipworm, but it does not control a lot of the migrating stages of most helminths, but it will control those larval stages that are developing in the gut of most of the helminths that it controls. Probably the easiest product to feed is Levamed, and it's mixed in a swamp pig's water, Coccidia, but otherwise I've got a very good range of control when you use a combination of those drugs. And of course there are some other drugs that are used, but they're not nearly as effective. Before we talk about some people's claims about why these myths work, let's include a couple examples that we can use to tie everything. There are standard practices that will help reduce parasite loads in your pigs because of the life cycles of most parasites. Rotating your pigs on pasture. You're not going to raise them on concrete slats where the feces drops into a lagoon underneath. Putting them on pasture and rotating them, preferably every week, but at least every 2 or 3 weeks, makes a huge impact. There are some forages that pigs can consume that have some anti-helminthic properties. Why is it that people assume these myths work? Many people just don't know what a credible source is. Just because somebody's brother raised 5 pigs on their farm every year, treated their pigs with pumpkins or tobacco or apple cider vinegar, doesn't mean that they've dealt with worms. Many people can raise a group of 5 to 10 pigs, rotate them every week, like I've said, and have very few problems with parasites. Because they don't have pigs on their farm year round, they're rotating them, and pigs will outgrow parasites. But they're not ingesting the parasitic eggs, they're being moved frequently, and that are in an environment, the pigs are growing so fast that it's just not a conducive environment for parasites. There's just too many broad contexts, too many unique situations for a one-size-fits-all with these home remedies. If you want to get rid of them all, by far the best thing that you can do is to use a combination of an ivermectin-based drug and either bendazole or Levamed. Again, anecdotal success does not mean that that treatment works universally. It may not even be working for those people. You just never know. Check out our blog at dowdlefamilyfarms.com/resources. I'll have that page linked in the description below. Y'all take care and have a great day.